Welcome to another episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Today, another restoration blog. Folks seem to like these. What we do in these blogs is try to show you the projects that we're working on, cars that will be coming up for full tests in a couple of weeks. This is a fascinating car. This is one I've been looking for a long time. A 1965 Jensen C V8. This is a car built in England, fiberglass hood, steel doors, fiberglass trunk, basically a fiberglass car. It's an all-English car, but it's a hybrid. Not a hybrid as we think of it today, as something electric engine, but a hybrid, which used to mean in the 60s, English or Italian or German bodywork with an American power plant. And this one has got a, let me show you open the hood on this thing. And you pull this lid here, pull that there. And as you can see, she's got a big Chrysler 383, which for England was a huge engine. It's a huge engine here, especially in a light car like this with a fiberglass body. This is basically a Roadrunner that went to Oxford. You kind of think of it that way. Four-wheel disc brakes, big American engine, torque flight transmission. This was restored by Joey and his dad, Joe DiBattista, up in San Francisco. They did a beautiful job on this car. And later on, we'll give you a whole road test on this thing. I just wanted to let you see it while it was sitting here. There we go. Then you kind of lock that. And then you put that there like that. And that locks the hood. Let me show you some of the other projects. Do you remember a while back, I found a car called a Will St Clair? I have been looking for one of those for years. Now, a guy named Harold Child Wills was Henry Ford's metallurgist. He's the guy that developed the planetary transmission for the Model T. He's the guy that came up with the Ford script, you know, the logo, the blue oval, which they still use today. Just a brilliant guy. Well, like a lot of people, he got in a big fight with Henry Ford, and he took his $10 million in stock, which is, what, 1918 or so, and started his own company building the Will St Clair. And this is the engine he developed. Just a brilliant, brilliant motor. It is a V8 engine, overhead cam on each side, twin cam I guess you'd call it. Bevel drive, no belts, just a fascinating piece of engineering. But unfortunately, by the time it was done, it cost about $4,000 in 1919 and 1920, when a Model T was just a few $100s. Henry Ford told him nobody needs a car that powerful. You can't go 70 miles an hour. There's no roads you can do it on. And so consequently, he eventually went out of business, but few of these remain. I found this one, although it was together, what had happened was some mice and rats. It was in a storage container, literally in a desert climate. It was hot. There was animal urine and everything, just years of it all over. It ate through everything. The intake manifold was shot. Here's the original intake manifold. See, this would fit on there like that. And then you put your carburetors on it, and as you can see, we've cut out, it was just rotted through in different places. Using our 3D printer, we did a 3D casting. We sent this to the guy who did an investment casting on it. Look at what investment casting is. Look that up and you'll see how it's made. But the great thing is, using 3D printing and scanners and all these computer equipment, you can now make any part, because there are no parts for this car. They just don't exist. So you literally have to make them. But as you can see, it's just a beautiful, beautiful engine. When you open the hood of this thing, it's so impressive to see these overhead cams. It had no water pump. It was thermosiphoned, so every bit of horsepower was used to drive the car as opposed to running accessories. But, well, let me show you the chassis and the body. Here's a picture of the car, what it looked like when we did the last restoration blog. It was all white, and it wasn't restored very well. Let me show you how it's coming. Okay, here's the chassis for that 1922 Will St Clair. As you can see, this meets all the legal requirements of a ground-up restoration. Every single piece of this car has been taken apart. Every single piece, every internal piece, rear end, axles, everything. As you see, pretty sophisticated design. It's kind of funny how thin the tires are. But this is basically it here. Obviously, this is the front of the car. It's a full-size automobile. and it's going to be fun to drive. I'm really anxious to take this one for a ride. And we're not that far out, so it'll probably be about, maybe 4 or 5 months after you see this restoration blog, we'll be driving this one. But here's something really unusual that I don't think most people have ever seen. It is a 58 Chrysler, one of the 300 letter cars. You know, the letter series, they were legendary. The rumor was they only built 23 of these, and I heard they only built 18 of those, rather. Then those were recalled. Only 2 or 3 made it out of the factory. What makes this car so special? Remember, it's 1958, it's a Chrysler, and it's this badge right here. Fuel injection. Most people tell you Chrysler never made it. Even Chrysler guys will tell you they never made it. Well, they did. They built 23 of them. And this is one that was not recalled. They were all recalled back, converted back to carburetors because it's just too complicated. Somehow this one escaped, and we'll be driving this one on the show very soon. It's fast. Well, this is Jimmy Hudson, our metal man extraordinaire. He does all the fantastic metal work on the cars. This is the body for that 1922 Will St Clair that I talked about. You know, where I see Jimmy doing this stuff, I laugh when I see these shows where they restore a car in 3 days. This is the grill. It was all just beaten, rusted.
Yeah.
Jimmy has filled it and been working on this thing for weeks, and it's looking great. Give us a little info.
Basically, the car went through a lot of rust, so a lot of areas down towards the bottom and on the edges, it almost rusted completely through. There was holes through it. So we've done it, straightened it back out, cleaned the whole thing up. It needed a couple of patches made into the trim. And once we got it all metal finished, we set it down for coppering twice already.
Yeah.
Just to build up the metal and what's left of it. And I'm going to grind it back down and just retain the original shape. And we're pretty close right now where we're going to metal finish the rest fine and polish it and just send it for nickel.
Yeah.
And it'll be finished. We'll have our original grill, which is really nice because to make one, I mean, we could replicate one and make one. That would take even longer.
Right.
But it's nice to keep the original piece of the car. We have the original badges, emblems, and being a rare car like this, you know, and Jay likes original stuff, you know, so.
And the last guy that restored it chromed everything.
Yes.
And chrome did not exist in 1922 that you could
Not
get.
for plating. They didn't use
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
So it should be nickel, and all this aluminum
It's polished.
polished up and cleaning it up. And body as well. The body just, it looked okay at first glance.
Yeah.
It was stored in just the worst possible place. A container that was locked in a desert climate. Not quite the desert, but down near San Diego. It would be 130 degrees in that thing. So consequently, mice and all these animals lived in the thing.
In the motor.
All the urine and everything just ate through everything. I see Jimmy's replaced all the wood. This is what they did, this sort of green color. It was pretty outrageous for the day. It'll have black upholstery with the green, so that'll look pretty neat. So Jimmy's just done a one. Even Dynamat inside the doors, all this works as sound deadening. So it's gonna be cool. This is for the rumble seat, obviously, so.
Yeah, it's coming along. We're getting really close on it. You guys saw the motor earlier, I think.
Right, right.
It's all together.
Yeah.
And we're waiting on that intake the casting just came back.
Right, right.
And once we get the casting back on the intake, George will put it together. He'll have the whole drivetrain and the chassis. We'll mate them up and wire this thing up. We'll probably have it together pretty quick.
And this is going to be a pretty quick car because they were going 75, 80 miles an hour, this thing, in 1922.
22.
When the speed limit was, I believe, 18.
And what I read on the V8 was it was close to 70 horsepower, as to a Ford was 25 horsepower.
Yeah, 22. Yeah,
22 horsepower.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's triple the horsepower.
I know. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, well.
Should be a fun car to drive, huh?
Should be fun to find out.
Yep.
Cool. Come on. Let's see what else we got. If you've been to this website before, you know I'm a huge Brough Superior enthusiast. And this is an 1150 Brough, meaning 1150 cc's. This is sort of the workhorse of the Brough range. This one belonged to a police captain in England who must have come from a pretty wealthy city because these were not cheap. It had this sidecar on it. This is called a petrol tube sidecar. And what that means is that you had your gas tank on the Brough, which held how many gallons, whatever. And then this tube held another 2.5 gallons of fuel. You'd fill this up. It was hooked directly to the tank. You'd put a little bit of air pressure in it, and that would force the gas under air pressure into the gas tank so you could continue riding, not having to stop for fuel because gas stations are few and far between in England. And for the police, I guess that was an important thing. But This is a pretty rare piece. I believe this is the very first petrol tube sidecar built, but I'll get more information on that when we do the update on it. Right now it's sort of incapacitated because the mag has screwed up, and we have our buddy Bob Smith, who is the best mag guy around. He's working on that for us, so we'll get that back and running, and we'll keep you posted. Come on, I'll show you some more stuff. Well, if you've been to this website before, you know I'm a huge fan of original and unrestored cars. And this one's about original and unrestored 57 Imperial as I could find. This came to me by chance. A buddy of mine, Wade Travis, called me. He had this car, 45,000 original miles. I think it was too big. The guy got it for his wife. She was afraid to drive it. But the chrome, the paint, everything's original on it. It'd been stored in the garage. A couple things had fallen on the roof, put a little dent in the roof, so we repainted that. And obviously, we're just trying to make it safe. Well, come on, let's take a look. We haven't really buffed it out yet. This is the original paint. We may put some new paint on parts of it to bring it back a little bit, but we're trying to keep it as original as we can. The interior was pretty nice, but after we sat in the seats a couple of times, it started to crumble, so we're having some new material made, matching the original material exactly, and then we'll replace new pieces with old pieces. I know a lot of people think, oh, you should keep it totally original, but you know something? You don't want to keep original brake lines, you don't want to keep original brake linings. We're going to do what we can to get it running, keep it safe, and keep it as original as we can. All this trim, all that, everything's original. Everything works on the car. Just a fascinating piece. Let's see what else is going on. I want to show you a really unusual car and a really unusual guy. This is Bernard Juckley. He is our shop foreman, also world sidecar champion, right? In motorcycle racing?
National champion.
National champion, okay.
Yeah, we haven't made the world yet.
The world comes later, but he is a national sidecar champion, pretty cool. And he does all the complicated work in this place. This car is called a Kleiber. This is the only car built in the city of San Francisco. It was meant to be sold to San Francisco residents. It was a pretty traditional car, with the exception of being massive brakes. As you can see, if you look, when most cars had two-wheel brakes in 1927, or in the early 20s too, this had these huge four-wheel drum brakes. It was basically a truck chassis with a body on it, with a car body on it. So the thing is, you could go down any hill in San Francisco. Brake fade was a huge problem in the old days. People got to, oh my God, you know, you'd crash into something. So that's why these were popular. Only two remain. This is one of them. And they only built, I think, 3 or 4 with this 8-cylinder engine, the Continental engine. Now, the way it worked is the distributor was driven off the generator. And at the end of the generator was this piece, and the distributor went in here. Well, this, because of metal fatigue, just broke and fell apart. There weren't any of these pieces. So Bernard scanned it and made a brand new one using our CNC machine. Pretty much. Show them how the distributor goes in there.
Well, distributor has a gear on the bottom, and it plugs into this thing. The whole thing goes on the back of the generator, and with a worm gear, it drives the distributor.
And when I got this thing, I started it up. The car hadn't been running years. It ran about 10 minutes, and I heard, and this piece just broke and fell off, and it's just, well, it's not pot metal, is it?
Yeah, it is.
It is pot metal.
It's
okay.
a zinc casting.
Just a zinc casting, and it just, you know, it was supposed to last 100 years, and it only lasted like 90. So it just fell apart, and of course I called the Kleiber company, and they're out of business, or went somewhere. I don't know where they went. So anyway, Bernard made this, and as you can see, he did just a fantastic job. We don't know if it's a fantastic job yet. We haven't put it on. We haven't seen it, but as you can see, he machined the whole thing, and this one isn't going to break. This one will last.
Yeah, we drew that up on the computer and then put it in the CNC.
Pretty cool. So see, that there's no part you can't recreate anymore, so that's pretty good.
Yep.
Hey Bernard, show us what's going on with the, this is a car that's been at least 3 restoration blogs. We're very close to finishing it. Well, come on, I'll show you what we're talking about. But this is probably the 3rd time we've shown this car on the restoration blog. Give you just an idea how long it takes to restore cars. This is, to reiterate very quickly, a car called Rabbit 1. It ran at Brooklands Racetrack in 1921. It lapped at 113 miles an hour. We're just making it roadworthy. As you know, we've talked about, we finally finished the brass water jackets for it. You'll see those in a second. We've been working on making it dependable. Now, this is the original clutch that came with it. It's what they call a cone type clutch. And this thing here is the spring. So it took a little bit of foot pressure to work that. But it slipped and it wasn't very dependable. It's a historic piece, but it's 100 years old. It's just not, it just wasn't viable anymore. So we called the folks at McLeod, and we've adapted a modern clutch to get this thing running properly. Now, there's going to be people that say, no, it's not original anymore. You know, it was a race car, and race cars were constantly improved back in their day, and if they could have done this back in the day, sure they would have. But now it'll be dependable and safe, and as you can see, Bernard made that whole, and you made the pedal assembly too. Show them that, Bernard. Yeah. Well, the reason Bernard replaced that clutch was for the original engine, which was probably
70
4-cylinder.
horse.
Yes, if that much.
Yeah.
And now it's got this big 250 horsepower aero engine in it. So that's one reason why it was replaced. And tell me what we have here, the two hydraulics.
Well, we got 2 hydraulic cylinders in here now on a new pedal linkage. One is for the brakes, of course, on the front,
Right.
and then the other one is hydraulic cylinder for the clutch.
Yeah, so the rear brakes are operated by the hand
Cable.
Yeah. So, but you'll do 70% of your stopping with that. But as you see, this McLeod clutch looks pretty cool.
It's a twin plate clutch.
Yeah.
So it'll handle the torque that
Yeah.
the motor puts out.
And even though it's only, actually 230 horsepower, it's massive torque. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's huge pistons
This
in
is
it.
18.5 liter engine in this thing. And then Bernard did a great job here. We still have the original axle if we want to go back to 1908. But see, this was a modified hot rod from the get-go. It was a 1908 chassis with this about 1914, 1915 aero engine in it. So nothing here is really supposed to be together. This is what they did back in the day. So we took off, it had no front brakes. So we got an axle, what, 29 Lincoln this is, right? 29 Lincoln axle.
Because they had brakes on them.
Right, 29 Lincolns had brakes. Were they hydraulic? I think they were, I can't remember.
They were hydraulic, yeah.
On Lincoln.
The drums.
And you widened the axle, correct?
Yeah, we had to widen it to make it fit the springs.
Right. You see the blocks under here to hold the springs. Inside these drums are 2 modern disc brakes, so you can actually stop. It's nice to be authentic, but it's better to be alive. So that's basically what that is. So Bernard has just been doing a great job in this thing, and this thing's going to be a lot of fun. This is a really historic car. You know, it's been famous since the 1930s. I've got magazines with pictures of it from 50 years ago when it was racing around. So when we do the whole update on it, when we drive it and do the road test when it's done, we'll show you that. So come on, let's show you some more stuff. Once again, our 1914 Detroit Electric. This is the one I always say we're converting it to Tesla power, not actually using a Tesla engine, but just to give you an idea how much power it'll have. It'll be 400 volts versus the 78 volts it ran with, so it'll be really fast. Plus it's got Bluetooth, it's got air conditioning, it's got a stereo system. We found a 1920s wood radio we're installing in the dash to make it look sort of period correct. We made these boxes. These are going to hold the batteries. The motor in this is liquid cooled, as well as the converter and some of the other electronic pieces, so that'll help to keep it cool. The motor has been hung. It is under there. You can't see it right now, but you'll see it soon enough. On this table here, some of the electronics involved, which did not exist in 1914. There's our converter. Oh, this thing is going to be cool. It's fun to build electric hot rods, especially ones like this. And with these non-skid tires, it says non-skid right on the tire. You don't have to worry about going off the road. There's no steering wheel, you just got a tiller. Oh yeah, this is going to be crazy. One last thing. Come on, take a look at this. Now here's a car I've been looking for a long time. This is a 1968 Pontiac Firebird. Now what makes it rare? Well, okay, it's got the hood tack, which I always like, ordered from the factory with tachometer on the hood. 4-speed transmission, most were 3-speed. Power steering and power brake, which is unusual. Radio, convertible. This is a Pontiac Sprint. If you don't know what that is, well, let me show you what it is here. This is a 6-cylinder overhead cam engine. This engine was John DeLorean's idea. He wanted a car to compete with the Jaguar XKE. So they come up with this 4.1 liter overhead cam straight six. The first time that had ever been done in America, overhead cam 6-cylinder engine. And normally this would be the low engine on the scale, you know. They came with a 1-barrel carburetor. Then they made a high performance version, 4.1 liter quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor, high performance camshaft. I think it was 215, 220 horsepower. But the thing that makes it cool is it's extremely lightweight, a lot lighter than the V8. So this thing really handles and drives nicely. The trouble was the high performance Sprint was about the same price as the V8. So consequently, why get a 6 when you can get a V8? Well, the guy who ordered this originally was an unusual guy. He was in the Navy, and this is what he wanted, you know. So I'm glad that he did it. These are really rare. There's not many of them left. I think it's the first American car anyway to have the rubber belt as the overhead cam instead of a chain powering the camshaft. It's really unusual, and it's kind of cool that it's a 6. And I'm just surprised at how well it drives. So we're going to do a full restoration on this one and bring it back completely stock, because I think that'll be fun. I mean, it's pretty quick. It goes good. 215 horsepower is quite a bit in a light car like this. It's really fun to drive, so that'll be our next job. So that's about it for today, and we'll see you guys next week. Got to get back to working on all this stuff. I'm not going to close it again. It's a little tricky to open.